Democrats take another step toward voting to impeach President Donald Trump. We have team coverage, including how the White House is responding. Fight for the unborn. Vice President Mike Pence updates EWTN News Nightly on the Trump administration's pro-life measures. Deal with China. The former bishop of Hong Kong makes a new accusation regarding the Holy See's proposed deal with Beijing. And what a scene! The Vatican unveils its Christmas decorations. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, December 5th, 2019.
Today, I am asking our chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment.
A historic day in the United States Congress as Democrats push toward an impeachment vote. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Mark Irons. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is taking a big step in the impeachment vote of President Donald Trump. We'll have White House reaction in just a moment, but we start with Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. He brings us this dramatic day in American history.
Do you hate the president, Madam Speaker?
I don't hate anybody.
Representative Collins,
I was raised
reason
in
I
a
ask.
Catholic house. We don't hate anybody.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi defends asking committee chairmen to write articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump.
This is about the Constitution of the United States and the facts that lead to the president's violation of his oath of office. And as a Catholic, I resent your using the word hate in a sentence that addresses me. I don't hate anyone.
This dramatic day kicked off with Speaker Pelosi revealing it was time.
The president leaves us no choice but to act.
Some Democrats have wanted to impeach the president for years.
I've been
Since
pushing
January
for
of
a long
2017.
time. That's right, absolutely. I've known for a long time, as you have said, that this was a dishonorable man.
Speaker Pelosi slowed earlier impeachment talks. In March, she pledged it should be bipartisan. This move is not.
Look, a lot of these things never start bipartisan, but I know the people out there will demand it because this is not a Republican-Democratic issue. It's about putting our country first before our party.
But Republicans tell me impeachment will damage the country.
The die is cast on this, has been for quite some time. If you listen to some of the Democrats, they were calling for impeachment before they had the crimes.
The Democrats' formal impeachment push centers on President Trump this July asking Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden's son. Republicans say the president was just making sure U.S. aid money was going to a worthy ally.
This president is doing his job and doing it well. And in fact, the withholding of the security assistance actually advanced American national security. It required action by the Ukrainian government to take historic reforms in combating corruption.
The House Judiciary Committee meets Monday to look at all of the evidence in this case, and committee chairmen will quickly be writing articles of impeachment. Speaker Pelosi did not lay out a timetable, but it's possible the House could vote to impeach by January, sending it over to the Senate for a trial, and they're expected to acquit. Mark?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thanks, Jason. President Trump says impeachment will be routinely used to attack future presidents, but he says it's a good thing Republicans have never been more united. Here's more from the president. When asked about what impact impeachment could have on his legacy today, President Trump said he isn't worried.
It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a big fat hoax.
And I still pray for the president.
In further response to Nancy Pelosi's announcement this morning calling for articles of impeachment, the president tweeted, "The do-nothing radical left Democrats have just announced that they are going to seek to impeach me over nothing. They already gave up on the ridiculous Mueller stuff, so now they hang their hats on two appropriate, perfect phone calls with the Ukrainian president." And in a statement today, the White House responded in part by saying the Democrats' sham impeachment is a blatant, purely partisan attempt to overturn the results of a free and fair election. Coming up later in the show, we'll have analysis from Adam White, an expert on the U.S. Constitution. Vice President Mike Pence promises the Trump administration will keep fighting for unborn babies and the right to life. After speaking to a group of faith leaders yesterday in Michigan, the vice president sat down with our Wyatt Goolsby for a one-on-one interview.
Why did you want to come here, and why talk about the issue of faith?
Well, the sweetest words the president and I ever hear, and we hear it a lot, is when people tell us, "I'm praying for you." I mean, as President Trump has said, this is a nation of faith. And so as I started this campaign swing, it was a great privilege for me to be able to meet with men and women whose ministries are impacting the lives of people all across Western Michigan, and to be able to report to them the progress that we have made, not just in a more secure America, a stronger defense, a booming American economy, but also the progress that we have made standing up for religious liberty and the right to life. I mean, Wyatt, I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside a president who has stood so strongly for the right of every American of every faith to speak about and practice their beliefs in the public square and from our pulpits. This president took action to end enforcement of the Johnson Amendment so that religious leaders around the country would not have to hesitate from what they said at the pulpits and fear losing their tax-exempt status. And of course, President Trump has also taken steps to end what was efforts in the last administration to suppress religious freedom. VA hospitals had policies that didn't allow Bibles to be displayed, in some cases Christmas carols to be performed. We've stood strong for the right of every American, including our veterans, to practice and to live out and to celebrate their faith. And in the midst of all of that, I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside the most pro-life president in American history. I mean, President Donald Trump, in one way after another, has taken a strong stand for the sanctity of life, signed legislation that allows states to defund Planned Parenthood. We've expanded the Mexico City policy so that no taxpayer dollars go to fund abortions overseas and support organizations that promote abortion. But we stood without apology for the sanctity of life at a time that the Democratic Party is advocating late-term abortion and even has leaders that are defending infanticide. This president, his vice president, this administration are standing for life. We're standing for religious liberty, and to be able to be here in Michigan with these faith leaders and celebrate that incredible progress over the last 3 years was a real privilege.
You got a very positive response when you talked about the sanctity of life issue. A lot of pro-lifers are concerned, though, that eventually in the future, the work that you have done to protect the unborn will be undone. If, for example, a Democrat gets into the White House or the Democrats get control of the Senate, what more can be done to make sure that the unborn are protected years, decades down the line?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential that we continue to advance policies in this country that reflect our nation's commitment to the sanctity of all human life, born and unborn. And we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to advance those policies. But ultimately, we know that the fate of Roe versus Wade will be in the hands of the Supreme Court of the United States. And I can assure your viewers, this president is going to continue to appoint strong conservatives to our courts at every level, men and women who are not going to rewrite the laws, but rather interpret laws as written. And we really believe that appointing men and women who will uphold all the God-given liberties that are enshrined in our Constitution and our founding documents is a pathway toward real progress in this country for the values that we cherish most.
You can see more of Wyatt's conversation with Vice President Mike Pence tomorrow evening at 6 and 9 p.m. Eastern on EWTN News Nightly. An active duty U.S. sailor killed 2 people and then himself in a shooting at the Pearl Harbor military base in Hawaii. Navy officials say they have not yet established a motive for the shootings. They also say it's unclear if the suspect and the male civilians he targeted had any sort of relationship. Pearl Harbor is the home port for 10 destroyers and 15 submarines. It is also the site of the Japanese bombing on the U.S. Navy in World War II. Saturday marks the 78th anniversary of the attack. At least 58 migrants are dead after their boat capsized off the coast of the West African nation of Mauritania. 80 refugees swam through rough Atlantic Ocean waters to safety. Rescuers are still searching for other survivors. The migrants were on a boat attempting to make the journey to Europe. Pope Francis has welcomed 33 refugees from Lesbos, Greece, including 14 minors who arrived in Rome yesterday.
Vuol dire a tutti noi, svegliatevi finalmente.
Polish Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, the Pope's almsgiver, called on European bishops to wake up and take a stand in welcoming displaced persons fleeing persecution in the world. The majority of the asylum seekers are fleeing from war-torn Afghanistan. The community of Sant'Egidio, a Catholic association dedicated to peacekeeping, immigration, and practical works of charity, is instrumental in integrating refugees into the Italian society. Monica Attias, anti-trafficking coordinator of the community of Sant'Egidio, joins us from Rome. You just got back from Lesbos, where you visited the refugee camp of over 17,000 people. Tell us what it was like to go there and bring a group of 33 back to Rome.
Well, it was really a great emotion for us because we have been preparing this trip since May 2019, when the founder of the community of Sant'Egidio went for a mission to find out about the life in the refugee camps in the Aegean Islands. Then we decided to go back with Cardinal Krajewski to try to do something for these refugees, because Pope Francis has asked to bring them, a group of them, to Italy as guests of the Vatican and of the community of Sant'Egidio. So since May we have been working for this, and eventually last week we went to visit them and prepare their trip to Rome.
Since 2016, Italy has welcomed a total of almost 3,000 refugees. How does Sant'Egidio help the asylum seekers to integrate into the larger Italian community?
Well, our model of integration is very simple. The refugees are welcomed in families, in private homes, in parishes, in religious congregations, in small foundations, and this is the way for their integration, to find a family environment in which they can grow, they can learn the language, they can find a work, a job through the network of the Sant'Egidio community. And we have often work in collaboration with the Vatican for this purpose, because many of the realities that welcome are religious, Catholic realities.
As you know, opening the borders to migrants has been a difficult political issue around the world. How do you think governments can work with charitable organizations to negotiate a plan to welcoming immigrants?
Well, this is a very interesting question, because we can say that the partnership that we have created with the Italian government can be a good practice, can be regarded as a good practice. The Italian government gives the possibility of using humanitarian visas, and the civil society, the religious organization, offer their help and finances and resources to integrate the refugees. It's now since 2016 that we have created this experience of the humanitarian corridors, and up to now 3,000 people have come under this scheme. And we can say that the integration process has worked far better than the state-run big centers, in which sometimes it's not easy to feel at home and to integrate into the hosting society. I think the Italian government is quite satisfied, and they have proposed to sign a new protocol for 1,000 more people, and so we will continue also in the next year to identify and bring refugees not only from Greece but also from Ethiopia and from Lebanon, where the situation in the refugee camps is really unbearable.
We look forward to following all of that. Monica Attias, anti-trafficking coordinator of the community of Sant'Egidio. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you. Goodbye.
The former Bishop of Hong Kong is renewing his criticism of the proposed deal between the Vatican and China. Cardinal Joseph Zen accuses the Vatican Secretary of State of putting undue influence on the Holy Father to make the deal. Specifically, he says Cardinal Pietro Parolin is acting out of a desire for a diplomatic success. Last year, the Holy See and Beijing reached a provisional agreement on the naming of bishops in the communist country. Lawmakers in Slovakia have rejected a proposal to make it mandatory for women seeking an abortion to have an ultrasound first. The measure would have also required women to receive permission from the father of the baby before an abortion. More than 30 organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, asked lawmakers to oppose the measures. Slovakia is 62% Catholic. New Zealand's Prime Minister says the country will vote next year on proposals regarding abortion and assisted suicide. Jacinda Ardern explains why she's in favor of euthanasia.
So from the time I've been a politician, I've always said, every time I've been asked that on euthanasia, I believe it's my job is actually that I shouldn't stand in the way of other people's choice on that.
The measure applies only to people who are terminally ill and likely to die within 6 months. The Catholic Church is against euthanasia. Next year, lawmakers in the country will examine whether abortion should be considered a health issue. Currently, it's considered a crime. Coming up, an expert on the U.S. Constitution analyzes the Democrats' impeachment case against President Donald Trump. The House Judiciary Committee announces it will hold a hearing on Monday to receive presentations of evidence from investigators as it moves forward with crafting articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. The news came hours after Speaker Nancy Pelosi made the formal announcement, saying the president's actions, quote, have seriously violated the Constitution. Democrats allege President Trump abused the power of his office by putting personal political gain over national security interest, engaged in bribery by withholding $400 million in military aid from Ukraine, and obstructed Congress by stonewalling the investigation. President Trump denies any wrongdoing. Joining me now to offer his analysis is Adam White, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Adam, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start by getting your reaction to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's announcement today. She's calling for those articles of impeachment. What are your thoughts?
Well, nobody can call this a surprise. I think we expected from the very beginning of the process, from the moment the House announced its inquiry, we all knew how the House process would end. It will end with articles of impeachment. I think the real question is what happens after that.
And what do you see happening in the
Well, the Senate, it looks like the Senate will actually conduct a trial. We don't know exactly what the process is. That remains to be seen.
The president sounds like he's looking forward to this opportunity.
I think the reports for a while now have indicated the president wants a defense on the merits. There's three basic questions that the House and the Senate have to ask. They need to make some judgments of fact, they need to make some judgments of law, and they need to make some prudential judgments in terms of timing. Of course, next year is a pretty sensitive year with the election coming up.
And based on what we heard yesterday from constitutional scholars who offered their opinions, there seemed to be some disagreement about whether or not the president committed impeachable offenses. Is there a case to be made against the president?
Well, the legal question, I think, is pretty compelling. If it can be shown that the president specifically acted to leverage U.S. assets to induce a foreign power to hobble his political opponent, I do think that goes to the heart of impeachment. Of course, there's a lot of factual questions in there. There might be facts in the record to support that, but what we do need are more hearings, and there's no good reason not to continue this process a little longer to at least try to bring in more witnesses and documents.
And what do you think about the timing of it all? Democrats have been accused of rushing the process. Again, your thoughts on the speed. It sounds like you think this really needs to be slowed down.
The speed is just incommensurate to the task at hand. If the House really wants to make a judgment for the eyes of history, then they ought to do it right. There's no artificial timeline that can justify, artificial deadline that can justify racing this. If this is really worth doing, and it would be a historic moment, then they need to do it right and take their time.
We saw the president react on Twitter today saying Republicans, he says, are more united than ever, and he said, quote, we will win. Strategically, what does that look like? So far, the White House has not cooperated, has not sent forth aides to testify.
Yeah, and I want to say, by the way, I don't think that their refusal to comply with the process is itself impeachable. Some have indicated there is. The presidency is its own constitutional branch. It doesn't have to submit itself to these proceedings. But in the Senate, with a very different political makeup, the president will have, I think, more of an opportunity to shape the case as he wants it shaped. One thing that'll be interesting is to what extent the Senate will demand that the House turn over materials, records, and so on to inform the Senate's duty. Right now, the House is complaining that the president isn't giving them enough. Well, what will the Senate demand, and what will the House give them?
And it's possible the White House, or the president could call forward some very interesting witnesses. Could call forth the Bidens, Adam Schiff, Pelosi in the Senate. Do you think that could happen, and that would make for some almost reality TV, and the president would love that, right?
Yeah, in this day and age, I wouldn't rule anything out. The last Senate impeachment trial 20 years ago was different than that. Most things were not done live. A few things were. I think this will be different. I don't know, though, who will be called.
Adam White, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
A pro-life bill was vetoed in Pennsylvania by Governor Tom Wolf. The legislation would have banned abortions based on a Down syndrome diagnosis. The sponsor of the bill, State Representative Kate Klunk, shares her message for the governor tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly.
We need this bill to protect these children because I feel that if we don't stand up for life and we don't stand up for these children, we're going to be going back to a very dark day in our human history.
To hear more of Representative Klunk's message, watch EWTN tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern with guest host Dr. Gracie Christie. You'll find a list of other viewing times at EWTN.com. Up next, why Pope Francis calls Jesus the eternal rock, and the Vatican flips the switch on its Christmas tree.
Chi si affida al Signore sarà sempre sicuro.
Pope Francis tells the faithful to base their lives on Christ and not superficial appearances. At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father calls Jesus the eternal rock and says we will find our happiness in Him and not the world. The Holy Father says his prayer intention for the month of December is for the future of the very young.
Cada niño marginado, cada niño abusado, cada niño abandonado.
Pope Francis asked the faithful to pray that every country makes children a priority, especially those who are suffering. The request coincides with the month of Christmas, and Pope Francis notes even Christ came into the world as a defenseless child. Finally tonight, the Vatican unveils its nativity scene and Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is around 85 feet tall. It comes from a region in northern Italy devastated by storms last fall. The creche is made almost entirely of wood. The ceremony in St. Peter's Square included marching bands and flag twirlers. The nativity scene and tree will remain in the Vatican until January 12th. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Mark Irons. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.